So welcome to the Building Success interview series. Today we're joined by Dan Webster, who is a partner at Gardiner Theobald, one of the most well-respected and largest consultancies in the UK, and also have offices all around the world. So today we're going to get to learn a bit more about Dan's journey from sort of graduate to where he is now, a bit more about the business, and anything else that he thinks is of interest to us and the market. So Dan, first of all, thank you very much for taking the time out of your very busy schedule. For those that don't know you and don't know G&T, can you give us a bit of an overview of sort of who you are, your journey to here, and Gardiner Theobald, please?
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Aaron, for the intro. So I guess my journey today, if I start from, I guess academics and school and work my way northwards from there. So, on leaving school, 1999, so that gives people, a sense of my age. So 1999, I left school, took a year out, and I was fortunate enough on the degree course I chose to be sponsored. So I spent a bit of time with a contractor. I was working with Salt McAlpine, so I spent a little bit of time with them in the period between at school and starting unis to go travelling, so save a few pennies. I did a 4-year degree at Loughborough University, so construction engineering management. So I did a cognate degree and something that naturally would lead into this sector. But obviously, inevitably, there's lots of people that don't do that route, and I wouldn't say that's the route you necessarily have to choose.
Yeah,
I mean, we as a business take lots of different avenues. So 4-year degree was split sandwich, so lots of work experience through that. Lots of it being site based, which was obviously great for my learning. Most of those projects being based in London, so that's kind of ultimately what caused me to choose London as my hub when I ended up going into permanent employment. I completed my degree, as I said, 4 years later, and decided at that juncture that actually, moving from contracting into the consultancy side was probably the route I wanted to take. So joined a consultant as a QS. I spent about a year and a half as a QS. I always knew I wanted to be a project manager, to be honest. So readily moved across. My experience, in the early stages of my career, a lot of it was corporate occupier led. So I worked on some fairly substantial schemes. Probably the largest of which was KPMG's headquarters in Canary Wharf. So 500,000 square foot of fit out there. So it was a really interesting project. I had the opportunity to move overseas. So I went and lived in Singapore for a couple of years and worked on multiple jobs over there. So a bit of manufacturing with Rolls-Royce and some high-tech work with Dyson. Yeah. And then I moved back to the UK and joined G&T 10 years ago. Reason for that is I wanted to work on a greater variety of projects. I felt like I'd kind of, there was a danger I was going to get pigeonholed and, in a one-trick pony just doing corporate occupier work, and I wanted a bit more variety. And, that's certainly come. I joined G&T 10 years ago as a director. Obviously made my way up through the ranks into the partnership, and, got an owning share in the business now. And, it's been a great opportunity. We've got a huge amount of interesting projects. I've had the opportunity to work on, manufacturing, residential, office developments. I'd say predominantly office. But working with developer clients. But that's how I've got to where I am. I should have added probably. Obviously passed my APC during that period. Did a bit of work between. Exactly.
I guess with the degree you did, you're quite sort of open whether you go to QSing or project management or sort of engineering thereafter. It's quite a good base level to sort of get you into different areas. And I know other people that have been to Loughborough as well, the links they have with businesses is quite good to give you really good on-site experience from quite early. And that could be quite useful to dictate your career further on, whether you move from QSing then into project management, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it certainly, it opens your eyes in terms of what the opportunities are that are out there and just gives you a bit more exposure. I remember one of my projects, Belgrave House in Victoria. I was working alongside a guy from Arup who was actually on secondment to SRM as part of his chartership program. So he developed the design for the building and then was actually implementing the design for his building. So you're just getting, cross fertilization of different practices you could ultimately get involved in. I wasn't necessarily, of course, given my background, couldn't have become necessarily an engineer. It does give you visibility of what others are doing. But look, for me, I certainly don't want to. People think that's the only route, because we employ people from apprentice level, non-cognates, cognates, and there's pros and cons of each of those routes ultimately.
I imagine with a business the size of Gardiner Theobald, you don't want everybody coming from the same place, because it's quite sort of linear thinking. If you have people from sort of non-cog backgrounds, whether it's engineering, geography, history, QSing, project management, whatever it might be, architecture, you can all look at a sort of a problem from different angles and come to different solutions. I suppose that's what's helped you as a business keep growing and win the projects that you have.
Yeah, of course. I mean, we want people, we want a diverse workforce, and it's diversity of thought as much as anything in terms of how people, approach a problem. So, we've got people from all different backgrounds, as you say, and whether they be people that have had career changes to come in, we have a lot of people ex-military, for instance, and I guess, people that have come from the military have got there's a rigor around the way in which they approach things that we like. They're very focused individuals, which we like. There's that skill set. We've got people that come from a design background, which is important for us when we're helping to support managing design teams. Gives them a different lens through which they can look at things when they're challenges those we're working with. So people from construction backgrounds, contracting backgrounds. So we take people from across the industry, but also elsewhere from outside of the industry. It's it's a broad skill set we're looking for.
For those that don't know as much about maybe sort of G&T, as you tell us a bit more about sort of business as a whole. It's different from your competitors. Obviously, you mentioned that you joined there and the last sort of 10 years working from the director and then a partner, and there's different levels of how that works. I suppose what makes it such a great place to work, apart from your pretty fancy office in central London. There's other reasons why people want to work for you. And also the clients that you're winning some of the best, most impressive schemes across the country, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think first and foremost, it comes down to the people. I think we've got the best people in the industry. Frankly, I always remember walking into the office on the first day, and I think you can tell a lot actually by overhearing people's conversations with the clients and the consultants they're working with on calls. And frankly, that was prior to Teams. So people were on the phone having conversation, which is really important. And you could just tell that these are people that are competent, that really understand what they're doing. They're giving direction. They are leading a process. They're advising, and that was the thing that really struck me. I think we have got some great people. By virtue of that, I guess we're very fortunate to have some really great clients as well. Yes. So I've worked on some cracking schemes with some brilliant clients who we look to do and do lots of repeat business with. Got a real broad variety of projects we work on. We're not sectorized. I think that's an important point. So people get the opportunity to work. You could be working on if I think of the team that I manage, we've got about 20 people in my team. We've got manufacturing projects, we've got life science projects, office developments, residential. So a real broad mix, and it just ensures our people get a broad skill set. And as a partnership, ultimately, there's the potential for people to get an owning share in the business, and it's in the hundreds plus of people that have an owning share in our business. So it's not a small few that have that, and it's a meritocracy. So I've always felt that if you perform, you'll get rewarded for it. And it's those that put the most in that frankly get the most out. So for me, that's to know that's there, and it's not just something that's said but not actually delivered. That is delivered is a big plus point, and ultimately why I've stayed with the organisation and I intend to stay.
And that's what we're speaking to people and more senior people as well, that there can be that sort of a bit of a glass ceiling where they get to a position they think they are deserved and sort of should get that step up, as it were. But it can be a very small group of people, and effectively one person might have to leave to then open up a door, and then a board to approve whatever. Whereas it does seem that true meritocracy at G&T. If you work really hard, you do really good work for the business, prove yourself, that sort of ladder of opportunity is always there, and there's always sort of rungs to go up to. And I think having that real clear career plan and an individual one-to-ones with people, so they know where they need to get to, what's missing from their skill set, their experience, to take that next step, and constantly reminding of that, quarterly or annually, is why people stay. And again, why someone like yourself at a relatively young age has got that sort of senior responsibility and can keep growing the business as well. And you mentioned some of the projects and the sectors rather that G&T work on. And again, whenever I sort of speak to people that we've placed there, or you and any of the partners, and you tell me what you're working on, it's always really exciting. And then I speak to candidates, they want to work on these projects. People walk around the city or walk around Greater London and they've either heard about a project or they know it's in planning and they want to get involved in that as well. Is there one project throughout your career, and it may have been when you know, a graduate at McAlpine through to now, that really stands out as something that you're, sort of really proud of, whether it's you were there, your first one you completed, really complicated, or just something that stands out for you as one you're really proud of?
I think there's probably two projects, to be honest.
Okay.
And both actually with G&T. So the post building in Holborn was an existing post office sorting office. We had a cracking client, JV client with Brockton Everlast, Brockton Capital at that time, and Oxford Properties. And it was a very complex building, as I said, retained structure. At that point, frankly, it was retained not for the conversations we tend to have nowadays around embodied carbon and the carbon crisis, but it was retained for ultimately other reasons. But delivering projects of that nature, when you're interfacing old and new, bring about a huge amount of complexity. We had a few challenges. One of the packages, the facade package, some technical challenges which we had to work through, and it was a job where I guess I really managed to cut my teeth in the developer world, and I started off in as a director role. I had a partner and the board partner that runs our team actively involved in the project, and over the 4-year period, I ended up being the person that was leading it on a day-to-day basis. So it wasn't, something that took, if you think about it, a huge amount of time, but my responsibility level really shifted in that period. So that was one. And then actually just down the road from that, Soho Place with Durwood, a development involved 2 buildings, an office and a theatre. The piece on that made that such an interesting project as an oversight development. So the office sat over the top of the Tottenham Court Road underground station, the LUL station, and the theatre sat on top of the Crossrail box. And so you can imagine the noise from trains and the theatre don't necessarily combine very well. No. So lots of technical challenges around noise and vibration. So acoustic challenges, which ultimately, not from an engineering or design background necessarily, they're the challenges you like, because you feel like you're learning all the way through. And that was a cracking project as a result. On both of those projects, great teams. I think that's probably another thing. We're fortunate because we work on these big projects. We're working with some other leading practitioners in their own disciplines. So whether it be from an architectural design perspective, both of those are AHMM-led schemes. From an engineering perspective, we're working with the major players, and you therefore feel that because we want to be on the front foot, kind of leading the charge. You're constantly being challenged, and you've got to bring your A game every day.
Because you are working on such complex, huge, interesting schemes, you can't think, well, the last one was good, we'll steady the ship there and we'll carry on. It's always sort of pushing for more and more, and that does seem to come through the business. And I've placed project managers there years ago that are now sort of directors, and again, the reason they stay is because they're always learning. People often want to go to another business either because they aren't personally developing their career, or they can't see where they can get to, or they get bored of doing the same churn work over and over again, no matter what sector it is, resi, industrial, commercial. Whereas because you open the door to work on other projects, and then it could take so long to sort of learn something, it feels like a brand new start. Like, a new year, we'll hear something new and something new again. That I guess sort of keeps people quite interested. And as opposed to your journey, and you're meeting these experts of the industry, you've met some really intelligent people, really influential people. Has there been anyone throughout your career, whether it was a nursery school teacher, a sports teacher, or lecturer, or someone you've worked with that you think's had a really big influence on your career?
Look, I don't think there's one person. Frankly, if there was one person, I probably wouldn't want to say it on here because they would listen to it. They'd never let me live it down for saying it. But I've had, I guess, lots of people that have influenced. But I think, for me, it's about trying to. Those people are everyone I engage with, frankly. It's trying to take the things you think they do well and their strengths, and trying to, incorporate those strengths into your own way you manage yourself and approach things. So I wouldn't say there's necessarily been one person. I think it's about trying to develop your own style as a leader. I think we look at ourselves as project leaders, and it's about trying to develop your own style. Bringing a bit of yourself, to the workplace. We don't want people to be a bunch of automatons. We want people to, have their own character. Obviously maintaining professionalism, but bring a bit of character. Have fun whilst you're in the workplace as well. Surround yourself by the best people ultimately. We're fortunate as I said, on the projects we work on with the clients we work with. We are typically in a position where we can do that, and therefore you're being tested at all times.
Is there any advice then you'd give to more junior members of, I guess, the industry, not just sort of project manager, but anyone within sort of construction or real estate? What you think they ought to do to better their career, what make themselves stand out from the competition?
I think for me, it's about being inquisitive. Particularly at the start of your career, asking lots of questions, showing that kind of enthusiasm. Also about thinking for yourself. Don't come to me with problems. Come to me with, I've got this problem. I've thought through in a logical fashion the ways I think I might approach it. These are the options. I think this is probably the best way to deal with it. What's your view? And then you can bring your experience to bear to say, well, I approached it that way on this occasion. There's multiple ways you can quite often achieve the same ends. There may be one way that's marginally more efficient and effective in that particular situation. So ultimately communication skills is huge, whether it be written or verbal communication in terms of what we do. So I'm always really keen to make sure our people are picking up the phone and having the conversation, building relationships. It's all about relationships and trust. And if you can gain the trust of the person you're dealing with, then when it comes to have a difficult conversation, actually it becomes an easier conversation because they know it's not a personal thing. They frankly probably know, they've not quite done what they should have done, and it's a much more amenable. So have the conversation. Ultimately, develop your style. It's you don't want people to be one dimensional, and inevitably that's an experience thing that you will recognize the need to change your approach and when you should try and change your approach. But I guess those would be the things for me. But just the key thing is be inquisitive, be enthusiastic. Really show that you're enjoying what you're doing, and frankly, if you're not, obviously have the conversation, and
I think that
we can do something about it.
Yeah, that's true for most industries, especially in the first 3 years. The more inquisitive you are, the more eager you are to learn, the more senior management will see that, and they're inclined to want to give you some help and sort of advice and sort of mentor you through that.
I mean, we focus very heavily on the quality of our service offering, and so there's a lot of investment right at the start with people, and frankly all the way through, but particularly those doing chartership programs and the training and the engagement there. And we find that you invest that time up front, it proves invaluable. I was chatting to a colleague earlier today who's starting, I guess, in her journey of line managing people, and it's always a challenge in the context of it will end up taking you more time to have somebody else do an activity than to do it yourself to start with, because you will have to probably do it 3 or 4 times before you get to the desired quality. But if you're engaging with them, you're explaining the reason why you're proposing suggested changes, and eventually that will start to sink in. That person will then ultimately be delivering that equivalent kind of standard that you're expecting, and then when they are having the same conversations, I'm sure very quickly remember the journey they had to go through, and it will be passed down. So we invest a lot of time, in our junior members of staff to help accelerate their growth as quickly as we can do, because ultimately, the quicker they can succeed, benefits all parties in the business. So.
What do you think will have the biggest impact? Maybe not one thing, or things will have the biggest impact on our industry within sort of construction and development within the UK in the next 12 months, in your opinion?
I think that it's been we've had a challenging period in the with inflation and interest rate rises, etc. I guess on the former of those, inflation's lowered substantially. Hasn't necessarily flowed through at this stage with interest rates dropping to quite the same extent, but that's understandable. The government's going to be a little bit more cautious on that. I think we hope that there is a lowering of interest rates. So it makes project viability, that bit more feasible. We have to work extremely hard, as we always do on all projects, but particularly at this, at the current moment, to make sure that we can get these projects into a position where they stack up from a financial perspective for our developer clients. Challenges with the supply chain we've obviously had this year, with insolvencies, so it's a constant monitoring in that regard. So that's inevitably going to be a challenge that we have to continue to work through with the contractors we're working with and clients. Another area, Building Safety Act, whilst there's lots of documentation around it, for those buildings that are high risk buildings, there's not many projects that have been of size and scale that have been submitted under Gateway 2 and gone through it. So we're all watching that I say watching it, but also implementing not really know what's going to come out the other side. So navigating our way through it. I'd like to think that the projects we work on, we deliver best practice anyway, so we're going to be at the forefront of the market, but obviously just keeping a weather eye on those projects that are ahead of the ones, speaking personally, on the head of the ones I'm involved in, to see what the output out of Gateway 2 looks like. So I think that, those are a handful of things that we've got a weather eye on, but I'm always glass half full, to be honest. I'm always cautiously optimistic. You can have this conversation with multiple people and they take a different lens, but I like to be cautiously optimistic.
Great mindset. I think we'll leave on that very positive note. That does bring us to the end of today's series of the Building Success interview series. So thank you again to Dan and Gardiner Theobald for taking part. Anyone has any questions for Dan or anyone on the team, when this video goes out, of course, we'll put some links and contact in there as well. But thank you very much and look forward to seeing you soon.